All right, guys. So I was going through Instagram Reels, as I do when I'm wasting time and should be doing something else. I came across one that was somebody going through the different days of the week with a different song for every single day of the week. And I was like, I probably need to start doing that because that would just be fabulous to be able to say this was today's song in a theme. So earlier today, I messaged Tara, my supervisor, and I was like, today's theme is I'm Still Standing by Elton John. Here we are. Thursday, I'm Still Standing. If you guys had to select a song for your day, what would it be?
My day's been so hectic, I haven't listened to music today, which I think gives enough of an explanation of how little time I've had to slow down. So I'm going to need a second.
Acceptable, acceptable. So the sound of silence is what we're hoping for. Hmm.
Yeah. I'm looking through some of my playlists.
So I've had a song stuck in my head for the past week now. So I'll just go with that one. It's Goodbye by Matthew Mole, who is a South African artist that is very fun, and I highly recommend it.
I like that. Read into what you will by the song title there.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go with a song that I recently heard from Dave Grohl. He posts it on his YouTube. He does a Hanukkah series every year with, I believe, his producer who plays the piano, and they put out their remix of a song each year. I believe this last year, just with putting all the videos together, they must have done a live concert for each night of Hanukkah with a different artist. One of them was Judd Apatow, but they started off the week with Pink doing "Let's Get It Started." And so I think that's kind of fitting with "Let's Get It Started" for the holiday season and the break. So it's a wonderful little series if you have the time.
It's
I
going
enjoy
on the
that.
list.
Yeah, I like how we've gone from like I'm still standing, goodbye to let's get it started. And I'm like, okay, you're the bright spot of positivity in all of our daily themes.
I'm a big fan of Dave Grohl, and so seeing his stuff from the past years too, the different remixes that they've done with just even just two guys, a piano and Dave Grohl on drums is always a pleasure. So
Amazing. Yeah, it's going on the YouTube watch list. Faux show. But thank you both for sitting down for today's Tech for Business podcast. So to introduce all of us, we have Matthew, who's our GRC analyst, sitting down with us. We have Andrew, who's our customer strategy advisor. And then I'm Kelsey. I'm a member of our marketing team, but we're all talking together today because we're all members of our employee engagement committee, which, because it's a tech podcast, we gave it an acronym, the EEC. So we were all sitting down and we were saying, what would we like to talk about today? And we said, well, why not just using tech for employee engagement? So first off, I want to put the question to both of you. What exactly is employee engagement when we're talking about all of this? How do you define that?
I can go first. I think for me, it's wanting to make sure that, especially now with working remotely, that people know that we care. CIT cares, their managers care, and it's doing little things like having platforms that they can interact with others on outside of work that we'll talk about later, or if it's just a little recognition saying, hey, thanks for the meeting today in a Teams message. So I think it's just, giving everyone the tools to just break down the barrier to say something nice or talk to somebody.
I'll agree with that. There's a lot of stuff that I know people can read into this and feel about it. I know that when I first started, I very quickly jumped into it, which is why we all spoke so quickly when I first joined the organization. But one of the things that I think is important for how I think about it is ensuring that all employees can engage with other employees at the level they're comfortable. We have a lot of people who are maybe less outgoing or simply want to keep their work at a level and their home life at a different level. And it's not about forcing people to act in a certain way or join in on things they don't want to. It's about giving them the tools, like Andrew said, to engage in a way that's meaningful to them.
No, 100%. And I think to kind of wrap up what both of you said is right post-COVID. So before we were all in the office, none of us were, but now we're sitting in 3 different states currently, recording a podcast all together. But that's how we typically work, and that's how we engage, and that's how we connect, which is right a whole new thing is to say, hey, you don't have to just be in an office, and that's why you work together, and that's why you all get coffee or go get food, is how do you create that same type of being connected without having to be all together in the same office, which I know is not anything that none of us are claiming to know the answer for, but that's why we have a committee to go, well, what is the answer? And can we have both introverts, extroverts, however you want to do it, have a say in how they feel comfortable connecting?
Agreed. I feel like I don't think this is something that I felt we were doing, and there's a good chance this conversation was had prior to me joining RAEC, but when COVID started, I felt there was a lot of push to try and replicate the water cooler conversations in a virtual space, which personally, in where I was previously, very quickly did not work. And so realizing that it wasn't just a replication of a previous system, but implementing a new system, and what does that look like? How can that be done, again, safely, respectfully, without feeling like you're being forced to come in on a Sunday for an appointment that feels like work if it's not, etc.
Yeah, I agree. The evolution of this committee, there were talks about it pre-COVID, and then as COVID progressed and we realized it was going to stay longer than we anticipated originally, we realized that we had to change things. One of the things I know that a lot of companies did, and CITs included, is like virtual lunches, where you would just have, you would just sit around and talk. And those kind of quickly died because they were just kind of dominated by a couple people. And for anyone who really didn't want to participate, it was just you were sitting muted, listening to other people talk. And it, really didn't continue on. I feel like with the engagement that we've had, we've gone, okay, that didn't work, but how can we still like talk to each other and stay engaged? And it's evolved into a lot of things. And one of the things that I was really happy about, and really how I got introduced to Matthew, was our book club. We had the traditional. We never had the traditional book club while we were in the office, but I heard I had a conversation with a friend, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we do a family one, and we just talk." And I was like, "That's awesome!" And I know that his family is all over the Midwest, and I'm just like, "That's a great way to stay connected." And I brought it up to Kelsey, and I think within the first week of Matthew joining, it happened to be our
day.
Third day, because we have it on the third Thursday, and that's one of the things that I feel like is important for some of these things is keep a consistent time and date. Don't try to run around everybody's schedule as much as we want to make sure everybody is included and make sure everybody is invited. Sometimes you just need to set a time and a place, you could say. The old adage, the same bet time, same bet network. Same, that old adage. And one of the ways is that Matthew felt comfortable enough to say, hey, I like books. I'm going to join the book club. And first thing he goes is, hey, I'm really excited. Sorry I didn't read anything, but I'm just here to listen and I'm ready to enjoy. And that enthusiasm was infectious in the book club. So thank you, Matthew, for that. But I think that's one of the important things for, kind of the groundwork on some of this stuff is just keeping a consistent time. So when new people join your company or your organization, you can say, hey, we have these things at these times. If you can't make it the first one or you don't feel comfortable enough, when it is the next time, and you're not left out because, oh, you weren't here at the beginning, so you don't come to these lunches or anything else like that. So, that's one of the tools that I feel like was helpful with this engagement.
I'll completely agree with that.
We're going 100% to everything that you just said, but it kind of made me think too, right? Of like, okay, well, how did we even set that up? How did we decide to go? How did Matthew know about it? And right, it's kind of the old like, okay, do we need one more thing on our computer? Do we need one more way? Right, there's Slack. We use Teams. So, right, we're not here to sell anything. But if they were like, how did you do it? We use Teams. We set up a channel underneath the team, right? The meeting is in it.
Yep. And it's all readily accessible for someone like me who pokes his nose in everything when he started.
and it's under a consistent place too. So all of our other clubs, both Matthew and Kelsey are in the fantasy football league. And so, we decided, hey, make a channel under there for this year's fantasy football so we can chat and have things in there. We never meet, but it's a fun way of interacting with people and having, that engagement there. But if somebody wants to join, knows what's going on at CIT, we have a certain group that you go under. And that is, part of, you could say, a toolkit of when somebody has a great idea, here are some things that we have learned to do that. Those are, two of the things, but, enabling other people at CIT to say, hey, you like video games? Let's make a video game group. You like, making things, knitting, crocheting? Cool. Here's what you should do that we've found that works. And it's, one of those, I'm not saying I have all the answers. We're not saying we have all the answers, but this is what's worked for us. But also find what works for your company because everybody's a little different.
Definitely. And I'd like to dive in a little deeper to using those tools that you mentioned, the way that I think it works. One of the reasons I think it works so well for us, and I'm going to use the book club as an example here. So taking it back to how we're not trying to replicate what it would have been like in person, right? I like to think of when we're talking about employee engagement, a lot of people think about in person, they think about that. And so if we break it down into what that's like, generally, even in a full group environment like that, you're going to have split off groups, right? You're going to have some people who want to talk about one aspect or some people who want to talk about something entirely different. And part of that was trying to recreate a situation where people who maybe aren't fully involved in one book can still join those groups. So our book club, and this was started by you guys, and it's something you did, and I really, really love it, is that instead of doing we all read X book, it's done on genre or a style of book or some very sometimes arbitrary seeming boundaries that I absolutely love. Right now, at the time of recording, we're doing books that will be turned into movies or TV shows. And so we can read anything within that genre to find something that meets what we would normally read. And then we discuss those books that we read, as well as like how we think they're going to be turned into movies, things we notice that are in common. So we've, instead of trying to say everyone has to be in this space reading this book, a physical solution, we've created a more tech-based solution where everyone can join in and it doesn't have to replicate exactly what your traditional book club would do.
No, 100%. And I think too, I love talking about book club. We're all like, yep, we're book club people. We love book club. But right, I think traditionally when I would think of a workbook club, I'd be like, oh, they're probably making you read a workbook and then we're implementing it and we're a strategy off of it, which is great. I'm not discounting that at all. But I love our structure of what I call choose your adventure, which I did not coin the term, but it's my favorite way to describe it. That when somebody goes, well, does this count? And I said, well, do you think it does? Because if you want to read it, that's about it. We're not here to gatekeep reading. But I think that I've learned more about the members and especially both of you by what you choose to read and how you react to it than if we all reacted differently to the same content, which I think has also been a little bit of a self-adventure that I'm the book club member that gets there and I'm like, I hated it again. Hated it.
Yep. And and I feel like part of it too is we've all like picked several books sometimes per month where you're just like, I'm gonna read it, don't like it, put it down, and we find something that we like. And we're like, well, I tried like 3 different books and I just ended up doing this one. And it's like, in a traditional book club, you'd be stuck with that, 10 habits of highly effective people. And you're just like, I read this in high school, but I want to be part of, this book. So I want to talk about books, and I'll just wait until after and I can, take that extra time and talk about what I want to do. So that flexibility and learning more about other people.
Definitely.
A lot says about someone from the books that they choose.
It does.
In a good way.
It's great to know. There's been some books that I've read recently that were recommended by Kelsey that were outside the genres I'd normally read. Same with you, Andrew. I've read Malcolm Gladwell books, which I'd not even looked at previously. So there's a lot of that comes into it. And I think within the book club space, one of the ways the tool is helpful in the organizing these meetings, keeping them scheduled, is that it promotes conversation that we instigate. We aren't forcing a conversation about a particular topic, because again, that's not what's happening when you're going to in-person events. You're gravitating to people who want to talk about the same things you want to talk about. And so we're not trying to enforce a specific rule on these clubs or these groups. The video game group, for instance, has a similar thing where sometimes the genre is not talked about at all. It's just, hey, here's something I've been playing. Does anyone have any thoughts? So those are great. We also keep them open for separate meetings for people to kind of jump in and just chat. There's no limitation to what we're trying. We're just trying to promote that conversation. We're not trying to limit it or specify how it has to happen, and the team can kind of run from there. We have a couple other tools. I know we've really focused on these groups. Is there any that come to mind right now?
Yeah, no, I feel like we did. That's like kind of the foundation of it, right?
Yeah.
Yes, CIT has been awesome with giving the EC leverage of going, hey, we found this tool, let's try it. One of them was MoveSpring, which is our fitness app. And we do, every other month challenges, or best way to put it is challenges, right? Like,
I still haven't forgiven you for November. I'm still angry about how much pain I was in for most of November.
And it's another way of conversing with other people who you may not know about, and seeing a different side of somebody that you're like, oh, I didn't know that you like to do Ironmans on the weekends, or you okay, I think the one that got me from MoveSpring was one of our developers had so many steps, and I was like, how does he get so many steps every day? And it turns out he does a form of martial arts as his fitness, and that's how he gets all those steps. And I'm almost like, oh, okay. And it's like you get to learn a little bit about people and what they do outside of the screen. and so that was really nice. So yeah, the engagement through that has been awesome.
Right, which I think is just another form of like, hey, you're not getting to know your coworkers only in meetings or only if you feel like talking. Because what you just pointed out is a perfect thing that as an introvert, I can go through the list and be like, this person is getting this many steps. Does anybody know why? And they're like, oh, he doesn't. And I'm like, okay, like I would have never known that. And maybe you're not feeling comfortable reaching out to them because it's cross department and you only know them by their name or their little online profile pic and you're like, I don't know, stranger, what are you? So I think even though MoveSpring was something that we had to get approved as an additional cost, it was worth it because it was something that was, another app. It tracks your steps if you have an activity tracker, or you can put it in. But we were kind of like, okay, how do we pick something that doesn't feel like it's shoehorning all employees to being, you're only going to focus on losing weight or you're only going to do this when you already know that there's going to be so much difference between time zones, eating preferences, personal strolls, whatever you want it to be. We want it to be something to go, this is a way to connect actively, but we're not going to force you again to go, this is forced participation and you should be healthy. Because I liked when we went through that they said, you can do mindfulness, you can do drinking water. As the least active person on this call between the three of us, I'm like, I get to watch both of them and go, good for you, good for you. But then when we're on team challenges, I'm like, I would like you both on my team because you are super active. And I'm just going to like bring up the rear and do what I have to do. But it's enough to go. I still did a mindfulness challenge with just the marketing team, which is two of us, spoilers. But we still did the same thing that I was like, man, we're getting really overwhelmed. We have 2 events going on. I'm just going to set this up. And that's what we liked, is that it had the function to allow employees to set up their own challenges. Because I think that's one of like whenever we talk to the EEC, we're like, this is a great idea, but this is only so many of us saying that we like it. So do the tools and the technology fit to say, can we give enough control to the employees that things spark on their own and become collaborative instead of just being a set it and forget it and say, either you do it or you don't, and this is how we want to do it? Because if I had to try to mirror what AJ does running, I would die. Just flat out.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Well, thank you. One of the conversations that we always have when we talk about events is really the 3 ways you can have events now is either purely in person, which we've had some of those. One of the examples was a St. Paul Saints game. CIT did that. It's kind of hard to incorporate remote to that. So, looking at what event you want to do and how, you could make it in person versus hybrid versus purely remote. An example of the hybrid that we did was really fun. It was our Halloween potluck. We're like, hey, if you want to come into the Woodbury office at this time to this time, we're doing a potluck, dress up. If you are in Alaska, if it's horrible weather, or if you just don't want to leave your house, that is just fine. But, come on to the lunch, wear an outfit if you want to join our costume contest. And it was fun. We had probably about, 10, 15 people in the office. And then we had, a good number who were remote, and, people jumped in and out as they were able to have lunch. And then the other option is purely remote. And one of the things we recently did was trivia. We made our own trivia and were able to engage with everybody through that, and we did it all through Teams. We created a meeting. We had breakout rooms. We put all the questions into the chat, and Kelsey and I kind of moderated the groups, and we're able to have some fun conversations, and all of the breakout rooms were random. So you didn't get into those clicks that you sometimes get because you're like, oh, I know that person, I feel comfortable with that person, I'm gonna go sit at their table, and we'll be on the same trivia team. And you don't get to know your other employees, or other coworkers, and that's just human nature. It's no knock on everybody. We're all I'm guilty of it. But it was fun where, you got out of it just being like, oh, great job, guys. Like, that was fun. Like, you learn a lot about, other people through that. So
I want to add two things there, because I did want to call out the trivia. I thought it was a lot of fun. I participated, the random teams, and that really pushed those groups together. And again, this is the type of thing where you could have done it in person in a similar way. But I felt that the way it was done virtually was very useful. I also want to call out that I still believe we were robbed and shouldn't have lost. But that's a separate thing. So I know a lot of work went into creating that trivia team, that trivia event especially. And I know that there was a lot of tools that came into it from how we use them, as well as a third party that we help. Did we use a third party to assist with that, or was that purely internal?
No, we looked into it, and it just didn't do what we wanted. And we're like, well, we already have Teams. How can we just make it ourselves? And we're like, oh, they like built into a Teams meeting. You have breakout rooms, and you can just say break everybody out into rooms just like you would at a normal conference. And so you can auto assign, you can put people in. So if somebody jumped in late, we could say, oh, this group only has 5. Yep, they can go over to group A because group A, only has 5 people. Let's even up the teams a little bit. So
it was a very unique use of Teams, I felt, and a lot of those tools on the back end are not something I'd ever seen how they worked. So it was I felt that the management, how you guys put that together, really showed off what the tool could do, but also how it pulled us all in, because I had a couple people on my team who I had spoken with regularly, but generally it was people who I didn't speak with very often, and some of them were, hadn't heard my accent previously, is how little we'd spoken. So it was great to meet everyone, and not in a nice environment that wasn't forced as well, because we'd all signed up to do it.
Yeah, that it wasn't. Yeah, it was just over a lunch hour that we were like, if you want to, but I know it's really easy to fall into we'll bribe everybody and give them lunch, and that's how we'll get them to, again, have forced fun. And we were like, we don't want it to be forced fun. But I think too, Matthew, you pointed out something, and AJ, I helped you kind of set this all up, and we looked at tools, because that seems to be the course of least resistance, is to say, somebody else already made it, we'll just use it, which I am not knocking at all. But of course, us being us, we're like, can we figure this out with what we have and take more of our time rather than just pay somebody? And I think we use so much technology without even realizing it as remote employees that I had to laugh and be like, okay, if I pulled myself back here and said, how did we do this? It wasn't just Teams. It started with a Teams chat between AJ and myself, where he goes, I already made some questions. And I said, cool. And he goes, I have it in a Word doc. So rather than send me then he just added me to collaborate, and we could collaborate back and forth, see the changes side by side. He went and talked with his wife and said, what do you think of this? And I went and talked to my husband, and they were both like, yep, I could get it. And we were like, okay, we got it market tested, we're good. And then we went through and we tested the teams and said, how does this work? And then we said, well, how are we going to get them to answer? Because writing down a sheet of paper is not really going to work in this form. You can't really have somebody hold up a whiteboard and be like, here's my answer, because you couldn't see the other group. So we could pop in, but we couldn't see them all at the same time. So within Teams, you can send an announcement, and we were like, okay, so we can post the question, but again, how do we get the answer? If you chat it in the chat, how do we track it? Whatever, that becomes a whole different kit and caboodle. And then we were like, well, as part of 365, we have Microsoft Forms. So rather than just put the questions in there with the answers, that people go ahead or not, and we wanted to only give 60 seconds to give that amount of stress bonding, is what I like to call all of that. So as we went through, we said, well, what if we just called it question 1, question 2, question 3? You just put in the answers. And then once we were done and AJ went through all the answers with everybody back in the room, I exported that from Forms into an Excel, I could just go through as he read off the answers, highlight who was right, or somebody probably could have written a formula to do this faster, but I was like, hey, there's 30 questions. There's not that many of us. There's only 3 columns. I can do this. And then right at the end, I was like, yep, I already know who won, pretty much because that team only got 1 wrong. So it was really easy to be able to figure it out. But then we were able to share all the questions to everybody to say, hey, and at that point it was around Thanksgiving. So we were like, if anybody wants to use trivia, we're not going to gatekeep that content. We can put it out there. You can use it. And again, this was something that we want to provide toolkits to multiple groups to say within our own organization. We figured it out. Yes, there are a few funny things maybe, but this is free. Free, I'm going to put in air quotes sense, right?
Yeah, time.
Time and Teams and 365 is a paid, but that's what we use. And I think that's what a lot of organizations use in order, right, to do. But you could do it with Google products. You could do it. There's, right, all of these different things. That was in our toolkit. And so we use the tools within the toolkit to create a trivia experience.
Yeah. And I think a lot of this comes down to that fact of one of the tools you have, and part of that technology is your staff, right? You are using all these tools already. How can you better use them? But also one of the things that I think really worked well with the trivia is that because it wasn't forced, because we were giving people space to choose to do it, everyone who was involved wanted to be involved.
Yep.
I'm sure this happens across every organization, but I feel it happens a lot more in tech, that we do have some individuals that are maybe less willing to, or just not the type of people who want to engage in those types of events. That's fine. If they're still feeling comfortable and discussing, that's all that matters. And I feel like I've mentioned that a couple times, but I just want to be clear. We're not saying everyone has to do something or you have to force engagement. Just remember that the team is diverse and not everyone wants to be on a podcast.
Yeah. And I think it's part of kind of talking about options too. Like if it's an event, when we go into planning it, we just don't go, oh, this is going to be in person. We try to talk about like, how can we get every single person from CIT involved? And give them the option to join. We had an in-person end of the year event, and stuff happened and we weren't able to get a remote piece to it, but it was part of our thinking to make sure that if somebody isn't able to join for sickness or travel or whatever that barrier is, if they have an anxiety disorder and don't like big crowds, whatever the reason they can't make it to that event, I just want to make sure that they feel that they are being taken care of and they're being thought of. And I know Matthew said it before, where he's just like, it's okay, we don't have a remote piece, or it's okay, this has to be in person or anything like that, because you understand, part of being a remote worker. But Kelsey and I have always said, but we want to make it work for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's, where you could say the love for these things that we do comes from, is that we just want to make sure everybody's involved and everybody feels engaged and just feel part of a team.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And I know I want to try to keep this a little bit timely, as much as I'm like, this could be a 3-part episode and we could keep talking. But really quick, just like last thoughts from you guys too, about, because I think that you touched on a couple things, right? Of what do the employees want, which I think is what we've kind of all been talking about, right? Is not what do you think that they need, what do they want? And that's why, of course, Forms, SurveyMonkey, whatever you want to use, whatever technology, they're out there. Huge part of it. We could have a podcast on its own about that. But then also, right, the recognition. So exactly what AJ is saying, kind of tying it up in one word that's all encompassing to a lot of different things on a lot of different levels within the company, but using technology and these engagement tools so that you feel recognized by more than just whoever your direct lead is.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a huge part of at least my experience.
Yeah.
I really want to bring up a quick compliance thing, just because if I don't, then what's the point of my job? A lot of people and a lot of organizations do have employee survey requirements. Please keep in mind that employee engagement surveys, culture surveys are such a great way, especially when they're truly anonymous or as anonymous as they can be, to understand how the team feels. Because for every person who's willing to put their hand up in a meeting and speak out about how something may be impacting them, or they may even appreciate it and they just feel comfortable saying it, there's probably another person who doesn't feel that way. So internal surveys, third-party surveys where someone comes in and helps evaluate how the team feels. These are technology tools that we can use in person or in remote environments to get that information as well.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, no,
I know I just have to mention compliance or else.
No,
It's in
and
my
that's
contract.
and that's perfect. And I think just, try things out is kind of the thing that I've learned from this, is, try things out and try to involve as many people as you can. Even if it doesn't work, if you tried to put a laptop on a table at a bowling alley because you had a group outing and everybody wanted to go bowling, but somebody was sick or is in another state, and it didn't work out because you couldn't hear them between all the pins clashing, you figured it out. But if it did work and they felt included and they're like, yeah, that was, kind of fun, and I hope I can make it next time, that. So that's kind of just my little 2 cents there.
I'll agree. You're still learning. We're all learning. This is a new way of doing this. Not everything is going to work out how you expected or hoped it would. Keep trying. The people who you're attempting to include will notice there being the attempt. We do. As someone who is fully remote, I am very appreciative of how, like you mentioned, you tried to get the remote side of things in for some of these events, and it just, for whatever reason, it didn't work. I'm aware of the effort that goes into that, and I appreciate that. It's part of the engagement. So thank you.
No, I completely agree. I couldn't have said any of that better myself. So I'm going to let you guys just close it out with those comments because that was fabulous. But if anybody listening is like, well, that opened up a whole nother tangent because that's our favorite, by all means, we're all available to chat, even though we are not, right? We're not trying to sell any sort of employee engagement software. We're not trying to do those things. But if you're going, well, how did you do this? Do you have a recommendation? Again, we don't pretend to be the experts, but we can talk to the things that we've tried and maybe failed or figured out some hiccups along the way. So if you do have those questions, or if you want to hear us talk more about employee engagement, by all means, you can always reach out to us at info@cit-net.com. Spoilers, I'm the person that answers those emails. It's not just a sales email. Or you can head out to our website at cit-net.com/podcast. And thank you, AJ. Thank you, Matthew, so much for joining us on today's Tech for Business podcast. We'll be back next week.